Hello, hello. This is the My Artifact episode number 3711. Today's date is November 19, 2025. It's been almost like a morning at 8:56 a.m. By the way, today I'm not feel that much kind of like some cold. It feel a little bit of warm. Okay, yeah, I'm actually soaking up the sun. That is really good. Yeah. All right. So should we jump into the question? Right, let's go. All right. The question is, what if failure leads to immediate success? What if the failure leads to immediate success? Okay. First of all, what exactly is this question, and why am I asking this question to myself? This is what if question. Why am I asking this question to myself? What if question is always really interested way to give the answer. It kind of like a force you to think about that reality. And when I try to think about that reality, when I try to create that reality, it kind of like a really required my knowledge and information that I've been through. And when I utilize that information and knowledge and experience to kind of like give the answer, it felt really good. It somehow it kind of like a somebody just, I don't know, it felt good. Probably a knowledgeable might be. I'm not really sure. Disclaimer: the information that I'm trying to tell you is not exactly right or is not exactly wrong either. It is just my opinion. So do not believe in any kind of like information that I'm saying, or do not seek for any kind of like information that I'm saying. Okay, it is just my opinion, and opinion are subjective. All right. So let's jump right into it. All right. Yeah. The question is, what if the failure always leads to immediate success? What exactly is this thing? What exactly is this question? Well, the question is about that. Ki what if kind of like a somebody? What if we can kind of like a some failure at something, and we will kind of like a somebody get success very easily? Okay, after that, or kind of like immediate. Okay, let me give you perspective. Example is that ki you are kind of like a try to learning a bicycle. Okay, yeah. So basically, it's this thing, your father is actually bought you new bicycle, and you are trying to riding that bicycle. At first glance, you won't be able to kind of like ride that much perfectly, and you kind of like a fall. And after you fall, suddenly you kind of like suddenly wake up and started riding a bicycle like a basically is this thing like a pro bicycle athlete. Okay, yeah. So this is when this actually happened, then what would be that particular world? Like if that particular world would happen, then this would kind of like create a chaos. Like not chaos, but like boring, right? Okay, let me give you perspective. What exactly is this thing? Why am I saying boring? Okay, yeah. Like basically in reality, okay, yeah, if we wanted to learn the bicycle, we fall not just one time, we fall multiple times. We understand how do we supposed to ride the bicycle, we understand the concept, we understand the balance, we understand this thing. Now when we do that thing, our brain is kind of like a learning little by little to understand how do you supposed to ride the bike, because there are a lot of complex things actually happen regarding about balance, regarding about speed, velocity, direction, kind of like a changing your kind of like a somebody the angle or things. There are a lot of things. Okay, it's not really that kind of like a somebody you are kind of like a somebody read the book before you kind of like a riding a bike. No, it's everything is actually happen, all the calculation is actually happen inside of your brain. No, basically, if you didn't really ride any bicycle, then probably if you are not really did that much calculation, you did your brain is not really equipped with that information that how do you supposed to ride the bicycle. Okay, and basically when you try to learn your brain to how do you supposed to ride the bicycle, it takes time. You make a lot of mistakes. You not really understand how do you supposed to balance, how do you supposed to kind of like paddle the things. It's a lot of stuff. Okay, yeah, but somehow something you try, fail, try, fail, try, fail. You try again. You fail, fail, fail again. And one day after you kind of like a fail, like after you kind of like a somebody learn from your failure, you kind of like a riding a bicycle. Okay, yeah, and that is good. That is great. But still, it will not make you like a pro athlete bicycle. No, pro athlete bicycle kind of like a somebody is this thing that you have to spend kind of like so much amount of time to riding a bicycle, regarding about the balance, regarding about kind of like a somebody the stunts and kind of like controlling things and that and that. It's a lot of things. Okay, yeah. So basically, everything that kind of like a we wanted to learn, it takes time. and that is good. That is kind of like a really good. That's why we kind of like a learn from kind of like our failure and things and that and that. But kind of like somebody the immediate success will gonna happen, then probably this would be kind of like somebody very catastrophic. Like basically after you fail in one time, then after that you are kind of like riding a bicycle, like a pro athlete bicycle. Then what exactly is this thing now? Then your effort is doesn't really mean matter. Okay, yeah. Because you already knew that probably is this thing after you fail, the next attempt I would kind of like somebody riding a bicycle like a pro athlete bicycle. Then what's the difference between a pro athlete bicycle and you just learn the bicycle? There is nothing really at all. Okay, yeah. So basically, is this thing your effort is kind of like something just very less, as well as kind of like somebody you will not the proud of, you will not get the proud of that doing a things. Like example is this thing that key whenever you try to kind of like a riding a bicycle, you fail multiple times, but after you fail you are kind of like a riding that bicycle, and when you get success you are not just success, you are kind of like a getting proud by yourself that you are kind of like a riding a bicycle. It's a kind of like a somebody the feeling of kind of like a somebody winning after kind of like a somebody multiple times of losing. That kind of like a gives you sense of proud or sense of kind of like a accomplishment or things and that. If you kind of like immediately success after the failure, then probably that proud, that success, that accomplishment feeling will gonna gone, and there is no empty. Like basically there is kind of like something empty. Like basically we just riding a bicycle and we just fail and we just riding like a bicycle like a pro athlete bicycle. That's it. It's kind of like a really fucked up. Okay, yeah. Okay, that's why it kind of like is really boring. So that's why just like that now people are kind of like doing somebody doing the skydiving, and they are kind of like somebody doing the skydiving at the kind of like a first attempt and second attempt they are kind of like a skydiving as a pro. Then probably we will not admire that thing. Okay, yeah. Like let me give you context. Okay, yeah. If I'm not really kind of like a somebody skydiver, if I've never really done any kind of like a skydiving, and I'm kind of like watching the video of the skydiver, kind of like a somebody way that they're skydiving and things like that, it felt like really magical. It felt like that. Wow, I wanted to do that thing. Okay, I wanted to do that thing. Okay, yeah. So in this reality, what would I supposed to do is that, okay, I just kind of like somebody try once and I fail. Okay, yeah. Obviously, I would have parachute. I will not gonna die. Okay, yeah. But next attempt, I would kind of like somebody flying like an athlete, fly like a kind of like a somebody skydiving athlete pro, and basically I would become like that particular person who's kind of like a diving like that, like diving like that. Okay. Another thing is that perfection. Okay, yeah. Usually the perfection is actually happen when you are kind of like somebody doing it again and again and fail and fail and fail and fail. Example is this thing. Let's take a Thomas Edison. Thomas Edison failed almost like a thousandth time to make a bulb. Right, yeah. Now basically is this thing, if the Thomas Edison is kind of like a somebody the fail at once and kind of like at the second attempt he kind of like a make the bulb, then he would not the make the bulb kind of like a perfectly. Okay, yeah. Why? Because of that, okay, at that time the meaning of the perfect is kind of like considered as a kind of like somebody just a bulb. Okay, let me give you context. Okay, yeah. Thomas Edison kind of like invented the tungsten filament, which can kind of like a light up when the electricity pass through, which kind of like a creates a bulb. But that bulb we are not using it right now. We are using LED bulb, which is kind of like an advanced version of kind of like a that bulb. Okay, yeah. Now basically this LED bulb is a kind of like something perfect. Okay, it's a perfect invention and things like that. But this actually happened by kind of like only multiples of kind of like only multiples of steps of kind of like innovations and things and that. And then after that we are reaching that particular place where kind of like we have LED bulb, we are kind of like a power efficient, which are kind of like somebody giving more and more light and things like that. Okay, yeah. Now if I'm gonna say that Thomas Edison is kind of like actually being successful at the second attempt and he actually invented the LED bulb, then the perfectionist is gone. Like basically this thing, the concept of the perfectionist actually came from the failure. Like basically is this thing, that Thomas Edison Thomas Edison wants to figure it out a kind of like a particular filament which can emit the light, and also which will not gonna melt while electricity pass through. Okay, so this is kind of like somebody that Thomas Edison wants that. But probably is this thing that the second attempt he kind of like make the LED, which is kind of like completely new technology. In the LED technology there is no filament at all. There is kind of like somebody just two couple of diode are kind of like somebody combining in such a way that it kind of like emit kind of like a particular light. Okay, yeah. Now this kind of like a very different technology than bulb. It looked like bulb, but kind of like a only very different technology. Okay, yeah. Now even if that kind of like a Thomas Edison doesn't really have that much information regarding about diode, that how it actually happened and things like that, then unfortunately the universe kind of like a make them kind of like a perfect, like a perfect innovation and things like that. Then who actually invented that bulb? Is Thomas Edison invented that bulb, or kind of like a universe that invented that bulb, or who actually invented that bulb? Okay, yeah, because Thomas Edison doesn't really have any idea regarding about diode and things like that. He wants to make a kind of like a filament to kind of like a emit the light when electricity pass through, and that's it. Okay, yeah. Now this LED bulb is kind of like a work on diode, and that's why the Thomas Edison really confused that how he gets succeed, because he didn't really know about this technology. He didn't really know about this kind of like LED diode, how it kind of like came and things like that. So that's why, just like that, now the kind of like assembly is this thing, the perfectionism that you are getting is kind of like assembly very false. Like you kind of like assembly feels that ki, where is that kind of like assembly came from? Okay, yeah, that perfectionism, that perfectionist kind of like assembly product, where it actually came from. And at very early stages that people don't really understand what is actually bulb, and at that time you are kind of like making the LED, which is kind of like assembly, I don't know. Okay, yeah. So there are a lot of things is actually happened. Okay, yeah. Basically it's this thing, if we kind of like assembly fail, and if we kind of like assembly learn from the fail and we understand, and basically the perfection is actually happened way after. Like basically some people are kind of like build the car almost like 100 years ago, but right now we are kind of like somebody driving such a car which is kind of like a far more different than 100-year-old car. Okay, at that time they have kind of like somebody just a simple engine that kind of like somebody move the crank and things like that. But right now we have kind of like electric vehicle who can doesn't really require any kind of like a crank or things. It can automatically kind of like do it by itself and stuff like that. And as also in the next future might be we have kind of like a car which can kind of like a fly and things like that. So probably what I'm saying is that the perfectionism is not the kind of like a things that you can achieve at first glance. No, perfectionism is kind of like a thing that you're gonna achieve by kind of like a simultaneous growth, simultaneous kind of like a little bit innovation to kind of like a make our product as much as better as it can. If you still not really understand, let me give you the perspective. Okay, uh okay, look at the Porsche car. Okay, if you are, I'm not really sure are you a kind of like a car enthusiastic person or not, but let me give you perspective. Okay, innovation is always growth, but design is a kind of like a things that it kind of like a stays with them, and it kind of like somebody creates its own value. Porsche is a kind of like a one of that great example. Okay, look at the like basically is this thing, go to the Google, search about Porsche car. Okay, search about the Porsche car almost like a 50 year ago and Porsche car right now. Okay, have you seen the kind of like a difference between them? The design is kind of like a somewhat something kind of like a upgraded version of design, but it kind of like stick with that design. They didn't really change the design the way that they should supposed to be. No, they are kind of like a stick with that design, and they are kind of like a making their technology as much as better, and kind of like a little change the little change in design, but not too much to kind of like somebody gone the essence of aura of Porsche car. Okay, like basically the innovation and growth is actually happening in the Porsche car is kind of like something very significant, and kind of like somebody every single year they are trying to innovate their car is as much as better in this thing. But as well as kind of like some design choices kind of like somebody stay cool with kind of like a relevant, and also kind of like somebody hold this kind of like authentic value for the longer and longer period of time, so that people will understand this is a kind of like somebody the Porsche car. Let's talk about the Ferrari. Ferrari is kind of like somebody making their red color. Okay, they are kind of like a stick with the red color so much that basically this kind of like a trademark for them. Okay, and this kind of like somebody creates its own kind of like somebody the identity for them, that ki Ferrari is always in the red color. Okay, and by the way is this thing that ki Ferrari, if you buy the Ferrari will not gonna let you to kind of like somebody put the another paint into their car. Like basically their company will kind of like sues you in kind of like court, and probably you will not then want that thing. Okay, whatever. So what I'm trying to tell you is this thing that perfectionism is not gonna happen by kind of like simply one single failure. Definitely not. It's gonna happen by multiples of failure, multiples of decade of experience, and multiple of decade of growth and things like that. Then after that we are trying to achieve the kind of like a perfectionist kind of like a things. And as also is this thing, the perfectionism is kind of like something still very vague concept. We didn't really understand what is actually perfectionism. Like we actually understand that LED is a kind of like a very energy efficient bulb and things like that, which can kind of like emit the light kind of like something as much as better way with less and minimum amount of power, which is really good. But probably is this thing in the future we might have kind of like something such a bulb which doesn't really have any bulb, or maybe kind of like something is this thing that we would have kind of like only one single dot would kind of like emit the light equivalent to the halogen bulb. which is somewhat something will gonna happen in the near future too, and which is kind of like a really cool, and it is kind of like something really amazing. So what is actually perfectionism? The perfectionism that we are today, or perfectionism as we are in the future? So so this is where the concept is kind of like a something very concept is kind of like a something very much fragile in its own thing. Okay, yeah, because the perfectionism is kind of like a something achieved by the consistent growth. Okay, yeah, and that is somewhat true in every factor. Okay, yeah, look at the Apple design. Okay, yeah, now basically the iPhone phone, since the iPhone 10 they are kind of like a iPhone 11, sorry, since the iPhone 11 they are kind of like a stick with that particular design, and kind of like a stick that design for till the iPhone 16. Now 17 has a kind of like a shift their design, but still they are kind of like a somebody not change their design, and kind of like a innovate their small thing, which kind of like a somebody really good. They are kind of like a somebody make sure their product is kind of like as much as better and things like that. So regarding about the question what I'm trying to tell you is this thing: what if we could kind of like simply get immediate success after the one failure? Then probably it would kind of like create a chaos and things like that, because the kind of like pride that we are getting to accomplish something will gonna gone. Also the perfectionism is also really gone. Also another thing is that now we are also kind of like somebody not really sure who actually invented particular stuff. Okay, like basically Thomas Edison kind of like simply create LED bulb after the second attempt. Then probably who actually invented the LED bulb? Thomas Edison, universe, or what? Okay, yeah, we also have kind of like somebody very much kind of like a vague concept regarding about luck and things like that. We always gonna believe in something that if we wanted to grow, we just have to fail one time and that's it. Okay, yeah, and this is what kind of like a somebody fucked up thing happened. Okay, this kind of like a somebody we will not gonna learn, we will not gonna understand things, we will not gonna understand what exactly is this thing. So if we're not gonna understand things, then probably we will not gonna develop that thing. Example is this thing that Thomas Edison kind of like invented the kind of like somebody the filament, tungsten filament, which kind of like emit the light with all, as also kind of like a sustain the electricity. Okay, yeah, which also kind of like somebody resonate with that. The tungsten element is a kind of like a somebody is this thing that emit the light and sustain the electricity, which can utilize in another purposes too. Okay, yeah, now basically when we have this information, we are kind of like utilizing this information to someone else, for something another purposes and things like that. Okay, yeah, which kind of like consider as a kind of like a ripple effect in the growth. Okay, yeah, if the one thing is kind of like a somebody move, then because of the ripple effect it kind of like somebody understand how it actually happened. Okay, yeah, and basically we learn from that. Okay, yeah, like basically other technology failure we learn from that particular thing and we try not to do that thing. And this we are kind of like somebody learning things actually happen. Okay, if we are kind of like a learn by kind of like a someone we are not really learn by kind of like a, if we are kind of like a get succeed at the second attempt, then probably we will not gonna learn anything at all. And this is kind of like something very chaos and very fucked up thing happened. Okay, yeah, so this is what I kind of like talking about. Dude, I'm talking really fast. Why am I talking really fast? I don't know why is this thing I'm talking really fast. Like basically I want to kind of like a talk as simple as possible as it can, but still is this thing that I'm talking really fast and just talk slow na. No, but it just think like what exactly happened now. Okay, yeah, when I try to talk, I talk. I kind of like explain everything regarding about the question and stuff like that. Then after I explain everything, I still have kind of like a time left. I usually record artifact at least like half an hour, and basically if I kind of like completed everything, I talk about the every possible answer and things and that, then there is nothing left to kind of like a talk to. There is nothing really left any kind of like stuff that I was supposed to say. Like this exactly happened. I kind of like mentioned everything regarding about all the possible scenario that what will gonna happen if the still I'm talking really fast. I'm not really sure why I might do that, but it's just like that na. When I have this information inside of my brain and kind of like I'm just kind of like eliminating just dub. It's kind of like a things that na, like the way that I'm thinking right now, the way that my lips sing are kind of like something happen. It's kind of like the things happen so fast that it just kind of like not any filtered out. Like basically the stuff that you are kind of like hearing is not my word, is my thought. Okay, and this is kind of like the speed of my thought is kind of like came inside of me. So that's why I'm kind of like suddenly just talking. That's why I'm kind of like trying to talk a little bit slow, but I'm not able to kind of like talk. That's why I'm kind of like ending artifact episode quickly as possible as it can. Boy, have you not breathed?
No, I breathe. Like basically, this thing. Well, let me tell you one thing. When you try to talk, like basically your mouth is kind of like only up and down and things like that. So in that particular process, you are kind of like sucking a lot of air inside of that. In this particular process, you are kind of like consumption lot of oxygen with also kind of like inhale and exhale oxygen and all the other things too. So that's why you don't really need a kind of like breathing that much. Okay, yeah. Fuck. Whatever. So it's been almost like a 20-minute. Actually supposed to be record artifact for half an hour, but still I completed the entire question in just kind of like a 10-15 minute. So that is okay. That is good. All right. This is it. And thank you.